So thank you for being here, and greetings to you who are online. And it is my very deep privilege to introduce A.G. Sano to you. And I'm going to just read what I grabbed off of the internet because it says better than what I could articulate myself. Grief, tragedy, justice, and hope have motivated A.G. Sano's art and activism over the last 30 years. The renowned Filipino muralist, photographer, and environmental activist is well known for painting large-scale murals of dolphins and ecological issues in public spaces around the Philippines, and I think around other places as well, well beyond the Philippines. But climate change art and the action now drives him. Before, it was more about advocacy because of my exposure to science and data, but now it's more personal than that. In 2013, AG lost 3 loved ones to the super typhoon. It's Haiyan, one of the world's strongest storms, and he personally witnessed its devastation. So he zeroed in on climate-related work. In the Philippines, we have, on average, 21 storms a year because of the warming climate. That's a quote. They are violent, and people and communities get hurt. So now I use my mural art to do mental wellness in the aftermath of disasters and volunteer for relief efforts. HG's journey is ongoing. He says, I'm still growing as a part of the environmental movement. There's a lot more to do, especially with populations in the tropics vulnerable to climate change. And I hope AG is going to tell you and share about his amazing walk across the European continent from the Vatican to Paris on a vigil educating people along the way about the climate crisis. So I'd like to introduce to you A.G. Sano.
Good afternoon, everyone. And for those who are with us through Zoom, some of you might be the other side of the world. So good morning and good evening also. Right, so I'm AG. To show you a lot of pictures. I'm a very visual person, and if you're not, sorry, we're gonna give you a lot of visuals today. Yeah, first visual would be this one. I'd like you to reflect quickly on this picture of a coral. It might be spectacular to some. Those who don't know that this is a dying coral would say, "Oh, that's so beautiful," but that's okay. I mean, if that's how you see it, I mean, the picture without anyone telling about it, then that's how you would reflect on it. And that's how I would like to look at the climate catastrophe or the climate crisis as a whole, that it doesn't present an equal footing or equal knowledge to everyone in the world. So many populations in different types of settings and different countries with different vulnerabilities. And that's how we should try to look at it in dealing with different people. We know that vulnerable countries like the Philippines will experience like death and destruction. But some communities in Europe would probably look at climate change as just removing one layer of a jacket and that's it. Very good. Okay. Right. So my journey began when I was 10 years old, when I first learned how to draw. And it's not my drawing, but it's almost exactly how I made my first conscious drawing. And it was a shark. Of all things, it was a shark. But my advocacy began when I discovered that my father had like really old film camera tucked away in his stuff. And that camera, it's not digital, of course. Many kids won't understand how this thing works anymore. but I had it cleaned in one shop in Manila. I was able to use it for like many expeditions, and some of them were actually like independent, like individual missions that I had when I was younger. I would go to the extreme north and south of the Philippines to document shark finning because I discovered or learned that sharks are being killed by the millions, like 100 millions every year, and the populations are declining like anywhere in the world. So as an individual photographer, I thought of maybe using my skill to help conservation work. But at some point, somebody like a famous shark scientist in the Philippines approached me and told me that if I want to live longer, should try to lay low doing this because it's really dangerous. But at the same time, I decided to go around the world and use my camera to document wildlife. And that's how I actually fell in love with nature. Because totally immersed with the creatures, with the creation. And I'm happy to share some of the photographs with you.
Beautiful. Not so fast.
Oh, sorry.
Wow.
And it was in Africa where I discovered or actually realized that what separates humans from animals is greed. When animals don't have an inch or an ounce of greed in them. When lions are already full, they would just leave the remaining carcass behind for the other animals to feed on. When I became a part of a whale research in the Philippines, we discovered that humpback whales actually traveled to the Philippines. Before we started this expedition in the year 2000, there was no scientific body of knowledge that says or that knows that humpback whales go to the Philippines and migrate. So when we found that out, we never stopped waiting for them every single summer until now to document their behavior and just to simply admire their beauty and their grace and witness how they interact with one another and their surroundings. Sometimes they get too close for comfort. When I say they, it's them who approaches us. But what's most important is we were able to document the part of the tail or the underside of the tail so that we can identify them as individuals. When we compare our catalog to the catalogs of Japan and sometimes with scientists from Russia, we're able to know where they travel when they leave the Philippines. But essentially, most of them, if not all, are actually Filipinos as well because they're born in the waters of the Philippines. And when the season ends, what I do is I chase storms. That's what I've been doing for many years when I was young. Yeah. Later on, I'll tell you more about how it ended chasing storms. Then at some point, I found out about this movie called The Cove. It's a movie about dolphin slaughter and dolphin trade and trafficking around the world. And after watching the movie, I felt burden and grief because I've been studying whales and dolphins for 10 years already that time. And to see mass slaughter, like senseless killings in different parts of the world, I felt really bad about it. But as an artist, my instinct was to do something, to take action. And what I did right away the next day was to paint a wall where I was in the northern part of the Philippines. 10 of my fellow researchers joined me. None of them were artists, but I guided them and taught them how to do it. And when I went back to let me show you this. It says here, "Hi, I'm dolphin number one." And why is that? Because we continued painting and painting. And the goal was to, wait, let me show you a map. That's a map of the Philippines where we painted and then the world. And the idea was to paint one dolphin for every dolphin that they capture in Japan that year. So we ended up painting thousands of dolphins because as we monitored the happenings there in one of the slaughter sites, turns out they capture thousands. Yeah. And I'd like to share with you some of the paintings that we have done. So when I say we, I mean, I include all the volunteers who have joined me in doing this. So from the 10 volunteers I had for the first one, as I speak, I think more than 250,000 volunteers from more than 65 countries have already joined me. Wow. And the walls became bigger and longer and bigger. I got invitations to paint in different parts of the world. And then from dolphins, we painted other creatures that are vulnerable as well, creatures that don't have voices, basically. And even indigenous people, as we fought for indigenous rights, we've also painted different endangered species of the Philippines, like the tamaro and the Philippine eagle. And then we painted murals for fisher folks, for human rights, for renewable energy, even education for children. And again, the walls became bigger and longer and higher. Painted about climate change, painted about children's rights, more dolphins. And this particular painting, I conducted this mural in Dusseldorf in Germany, together with Syrian refugees. And then I continued chasing storms, and in the aftermath, I would leave some mark in the devastation. Like this engineered roof that's supposed to be storm-proof, but it practically looked like a toilet paper after one super typhoon hit this town. And then painted this wall together with school kids in a small island in the Turtle Islands. It's a group of small islands between Malaysia and the Philippines. It's actually closer to the Philippines. Most of the students there, whom I taught how to draw, didn't even speak our language. They spoke the local language of Sabah, and didn't deter me in continuing the mission of teaching them. And after letting them know how to do basic drawing, we painted the wall together. Then when we go to these islands, we need like military escorts or security escorts because of the prevailing piracy and terrorist activities in those southern waters. So I was with a group of Philippine Marines, and they were just watching me and the kids paint the wall. At some point, they asked if they could paint because they're doing nothing really. And I said, of course you can paint. So we painted together with the kids. And I learned later on that Muslim kids are actually afraid of Christians. And usually, it's the soldiers from the northern part and the middle part of the Philippines who represents Christians in their area. And at that point, when they were painting together, I saw a really beautiful image of art being a bridge in erasing the fears and the doubts of those two different communities coming together. And at that point, I really thought that you don't need language to actually commune with the others. And art can be that bridge. So what I did was I continued spending a lot of time in the southern regions, eventually teaching in the most dangerous part of the Philippines that we call conflict zones, where they still have the ongoing wars. And I painted a lot of what we call peace murals in those southern islands. And then,
so fast.
sorry. Okay. But then again, at some point, I said maybe it's not enough. I wanted to do more. Wanted to do more. And when I went back to Manila, that was 2013. Together with some peace advocates, we talked to the leadership of what we call the armed forces of the Philippines, because they have a big camp right in the middle of Metro Manila with walls surrounding the camp, probably around 4.3 kilometers long. So we asked the leadership if they can lend around 100 meters for us to paint like peace murals with the local street artists. And then the chief of staff told us, why don't you paint everything? It was like a big problem, but it was a good problem for us. So we organized and organized, and I gave workshops to volunteers. And eventually we painted the longest peace mural in the world.
Wow.
It was 4.3 kilometers. More than 6,000 volunteers came to help us paint in a period of 3 months. Like every weekend, like Saturday, Sunday, we will be there. The volunteers will be there. And we kept on painting until we finished the whole stretch. Now let us go to the actual topic of my talk. The Philippines is probably the most vulnerable country. Most of the time it gets declared as the most vulnerable country when it comes to weather disturbances relating to the changing climate. When we talk about typhoons, that's pretty much normal to any Filipino that you would meet. Like we have an average of 21 weather disturbances every year. That tells a lot of how it is to live in the Philippines. And the reason why this happens is because we're at the gateway of the Pacific. I'll show you a map later, but okay, this is what we encounter about 21 times a year. There are many other countries don't even experience a typhoon, not once in a year, but for us it's normal. Now, let me show you a graph that shows why we believe that this is really happening, the change in climate is really happening. So this is up to 2013. Now, why 2013? It's because that's when Super Typhoon Haiyan happened. The graph clearly shows that it's getting stronger. Haiyan was about 378 kilometers per hour around the eye. And imagine taking your car to I-95. We're driving at I-95, speeding up to, let's say, 100 kilometers or what, 80 miles per hour. Triple that or multiply that almost 4 times. That's the speed with the strength of the storm around the eye, and to subject human beings to that kind of power. No, that's unimaginable. But I saw that firsthand and I experienced that. By saying that, like I said, some communities would probably just remove a layer of jacket, but for us, it actually threatens our way of life. It's not just about losing the roof of your house, not just wading to the flood. No, these are violent floods, and it's not. Whole communities gets decimated because of the typhoons that hit the Philippines. The next graph shows the economic disturbance. Again, 2013. If you look at the numbers from 2006, way below, you don't need to see the figures. Just look at the color of the graph. It's like exponential already. Okay. I'd like to introduce you to a group of human beings that I would call humans of Tacloban. Tacloban City is the ground zero of Super Typhoon Haiyan. And first is Uncle James. And that's my Uncle James and Aunt Bella. I was with them the day before the Super Typhoon Haiyan hit Tacloban City. And they were inviting me to stay at their house to let the storm pass. But at that one, I told myself maybe I should say no, because I don't want them to have a burden of having a visitor or a guest while the typhoon is happening. It would be better if they would attend to themselves and to their house. So I declined. Another person that I declined is my friend Agit. He is Agit with his beautiful family. So the day before, well, he's a good friend of mine. I met him in Manila. Then when I learned that he's also from Tacloban City, where my father comes from or came from, we had an instant bond, and we spent a lot of time doing art, doing music for many years. Finally, he decided to bring his family home to Tacloban and stay there for good. So I would visit him from time to time. I was on assignment for an NGO that document conservation program that time. But since it was also in the region, I decided to pass by Tacloban City first to visit Agit. Third person is Sano. At that time, he was the lead negotiator of the Philippines in the climate COPs. So he was the lead head of delegation of the Philippines whenever there's the UN climate COP. And exactly that year, and exactly the week when Typhoon Haiyan hit Tacloban City, Yem was in Warsaw, Poland for the UN COP. Okay, so Super Typhoon Haiyan or Yolanda, local name, happened. This is a satellite view of the storm system. Maybe for some this looks scary, but if you don't really know what's happening underneath, it's just a picture of circular moving clouds, right? But probably go into a little bit of detail later. But what happened was I had my camera and I was ready to document. Okay, so like I said, I declined the offer of my uncle to stay in their house. Uh, Instead of staying in Agit's house, I decided to find another place. So Agit found a way for me to find a shelter, and he asked his friends to take care of me. So we found the spot. It's a small building in the downtown area of Tacloban City. And I found a room on the top floor, which is the fourth floor. So it was a concrete building. So I said, maybe it's gonna hold, it's gonna be fine. Well, obviously I survived. But the moment I got out of the building, there was still the what we call the storm surge or the floods that came from the sea. It's salt water. It was like a raging river. I wanted to go out to find a way to communicate with my family. Because at that point, no more communication lines, no more electricity, all the powers were down. First image that I saw, and I took a picture of, is this. I blurred the image because it's could trigger anxiety. But you know you know what I wanted to show here. These are dead Filipinos who were alive a few minutes earlier. Um, Everywhere you look, there were floating bodies, like animals, human beings together. Continued on, tried to find my way to the provincial capital because I know people from the media because I also am a media practitioner. And I know that some of my friends were broadcasting before the typhoon hit, and they were at the capital. So I tried to find my way, but the roads were blocked with fallen trees, cars on top of each other. Electric posts were all down. Some roofs are like on top of the cars. It's really crazy. So I just walked to the other blocks and I could see the same thing. Flooding, devastation, people walking to no direction at all or to all directions. People were confused of what's happening. Yeah, it's crazy. I wanted to go past this road, but it's impassable and it's impossible. And this is what really caught my attention. Were there were boats docked at the downtown area before the storm hit, and I saw the boats because I went out that night. The morning after the storm, I couldn't see any boats, and I found out that the boats actually reached the other side of the bay and destroyed houses where people were inside. And this is the view. This the scene right after. I saw some drone images afterwards. I mean, months later, and these are some of them. Like comparisons when this is the before and that's the after. Might not be clear, but if you would look at the vegetation, normally vegetation would hold during such events, but they were totally decimated. Yeah, everything was left like rubble. You won't see the rectangular roofs anymore. And this happened because 45-foot waves came in and destroyed the entire city, especially the community here, where my friend Agit lived, where I was supposed to stay that night.
What city is this?
Tacloban, Tacloban City. Tacloban City is actually an economic hub of the region. That's why it's populated and urbanized. But the waves that hit Tacloban City were like stuff out of nightmares. Like you would wake up and you see your house underwater. Another big realization is that I realized that in such disasters, some such aftermath, good people, like honest living people, if they go desperate, if their family don't have food anymore, they don't have water or milk for their kids, they would do this. And these are good people. These are good people. One of the men who I was with doing our missions around the ground zero area, saw his teacher, his beloved high school teacher, looting. And he was like destroyed. He was heartbroken to see that. I said, that's that. He was a good man. I said, this is a different situation. We're not familiar with this. And I believe he's doing it for a good reason. And then when I say that I was with a group of men, found myself volunteering for the cadaver retrieval team. It was an informal setup. I saw this truck going around the town, wherever they could go. And I realized that they were picking up dead bodies. Mm-hmm. So I asked them, how many groups are you? Because I know there are a lot of dead bodies. We don't know, it's just us. So there were 6 men. One is the driver, one is a doctor, then the 4 others would take turns in carrying the dead bodies on top of the truck. So I said, maybe you need another pair of hands. They said, yes, of course. So I spent the next few days going around the city with them, putting dead bodies into 12, 12 pieces of body bags. So how can 12 pieces of body bags work when you have thousands of dead bodies around? What we did was we would use a body bag to carry one body, and me and another guy would remove the dead body, give back the body bag to the people below, and we would recycle it. But what's the worst part that I can never forget is when I fit 4 children in one body bag because we had to. And it's hard to forgive yourself if you do something like that. So finally, I was able to connect to my family in Manila and to other friends in Manila. And I told my story to different journalists who wanted to tell the world what happened there. The worst part is, what's worse in putting 4 children in one body bag is unloading them down the truck. And I would say that this photo is the lowest moment of my life. when we had to dump the bodies. If you can see the back of the truck is lifted up. And when the back of the truck is lifted up, it's like dumping gravel or sand. But this time we were actually dumping them down. The driver to my right was crying and he was asking if we were doing the right thing. But all I can say, all I was able to tell him is that you have no choice. You have to work to move fast, to get back in the streets to get the other bodies because it could cause an epidemic or it could spread disease. On the third day of gathering bodies, I found out two important things. First, while we were going around the city, one of Agit's friends saw us, I mean the team, and he ran to me and he told me the worst news that Agit and his whole family perished. And what I can't forget is that I didn't cry. And I told myself, I can't cry. I must not cry. I must shut down all my emotions. Because I don't know until when I'll be trapped in ground zero. And I would need to be sane to be able to escape this ordeal. And I didn't cry until a year after. Another thing I discovered on the third day is that my brother was given the microphone at the plenary of the UN summit in Warsaw. And he gave a speech, a really impassioned speech. Because at that time, although they already knew that I was alive, but our relatives were still missing that time.
My country is being tested by this hellstorm called Super Typhoon Haiyan. We remain uncertain as to the full extent of the damage and devastation as information trickles in agonizingly slow manner because power lines and communication lines have been cut off and may take a while before they are restored. The initial assessment showed that Haiyan left a wake of massive destruction that is unprecedented, unthinkable, and horrific. And the devastation is staggering. I struggle to find words even for the images that we see on the news coverage. And I struggle to find words to describe how I feel about the losses. Up to this hour, I agonize, waiting for word to the fate of my very own relatives. What gives me renewed strength and great relief is that my own brother has communicated to us and he had survived the onslaught. I speak for my delegation, but I speak for the countless people who will no longer be able to speak for themselves after perishing from the storm. I speak also for those who have been orphaned by the storm. I speak for those the people now raising it's time to save survivors and alleviate the suffering of the people affected. We can take drastic action now to ensure that we prevent a future where super typhoons become a way of life. Can we ever attain the ultimate objective of the convention, which is to prevent dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate system? By failing to meet the objective of the convention, we may have ratified our own doom. We have to confront the issue of loss and damage. Loss and damage is a reality today across the world. We cannot solve climate change when we seek to spew more emissions. In solidarity with my countrymen who are struggling to find food back home, and with my brother who has not had food for the last 3 days, with all due respect, Mr. President, and I mean no disrespect for your kind hospitality, I will now commence a voluntary fasting for the climate. This means I will voluntarily refrain from eating food during this call until a meaningful outcome is in sight, until concrete pledges have been made to ensure mobilization of resources for the Green Climate Fund. We cannot afford a fourth cup with an empty GCF. Until the promise of the operationalization of a loss and damage mechanism has been fulfilled, until there is assurance on financial adaptation, until we see real ambition on climate action in accordance with the principles we have so upheld. Mr. President, this process has been called a farce It has been called an annual carbon-intensive gathering of useless frequent flyers. It has also been called saving tomorrow today. We can fix this. We can stop this madness.
Thank you, Philippines, for your great speech.
Until now, no others reason, whether speech or proclamation, had been given the longer standing ovation in the UN COP. Not even when the Paris Agreement was signed. The support globally was tremendous, and he was able to gather a lot of help from the international community to pour into Tacloban City during that time. And when he got home, he actually stepped down from government and went back to his work for civil society. And together, we embarked on this mission to connect to as many communities like firsthand as we can. And he asked me if, so I've been doing a lot of long distance walks. And he asked me if we can walk from Manila to Tacloban to commemorate the first anniversary, modeling what Mahatma Gandhi did when he got the global attention to the salt farmers of India. I said, of course, we can do it. So we started walking from October 2 of 2014, birthday of Mahatma Gandhi, which is also the Global Day of Peace. And we finished walking exactly on the day of the anniversary of Haiyan. A lot of people sent us off from what we call the kilometer zero of the Philippines in Manila. And when we got to the bridge that would connect the island of where Tacloban is, there were 12 of us who walked all the way. But when we got to that bridge, when we looked back, couldn't contain our tears because there were thousands of people behind us. And then we didn't stop there. A lot of people from Tacloban City wanted my brother to bring the message to the global stage because they knew he had that platform. So what we did is we banded together with other survivors of different super typhoons that happened in the past few years in the Philippines. And we were helped by Greenpeace Philippines to file a petition, a human rights petition, a case against the top 50 corporations to whom big percentage of the global historical emissions is attributed to. And it's the first ever type of petition ever done in the world. That was in 2015. Sept year 2022 that we actually won the case. But we kept on walking. As Sally mentioned, we've been embarking on these very long walks, like thousands of kilometer walks across different parts of the world, including Europe. This was before the Paris Agreement was forged. So we started walking from Rome, and we walked 1,500 kilometers to reach Paris in time for the COP. And we had a lot of engagements with platforms in Paris. But what's more important is what happened in between, where almost every day we were able to talk to communities. We talked about solutions rather than the problems. We talked about how transformation can be done. And one of the most important things that I can never forget that I learned from the rural communities of Italy is that we should not stop conversing with each other. Conversations, activities like this will get out the best out of our minds and out of our hearts. And as every time we had the chance, I would paint a mural together with anyone who wants to paint with me. And we were able to paint many murals across France and Italy, and even in the World Council of Churches building in Geneva when we passed by Switzerland. We crossed the Alps. For Filipinos, this is not normal. It was really hard. I'm not gonna lie, a bit totally honest. That there were times when I thought I can't do it anymore. But this may sound romantic, but the truth is, every time I get to that point, I would just think of Agit, because my goal essentially is to reach Paris, so that I can tell the world that there was a person with the name of Agit Sustento who existed, because I refuse to let him become part of the statistics where you only talk about numbers, that there were, what, 6,000 or 15,000 who perished. But who were those people? Those people used to live a good life. They enjoyed the sun. They played music. You know, they enjoyed their families. They enjoyed their Sunday barbecue and whatever. And that's what I envisioned to do. That's what kept me going all the way to Paris. Until finally, we got to the COP. Apart from the platforms that we got from the venue of the COP itself, we were able to connect and stand alongside with the indigenous communities from all over the world. And because of this walk, we also met world leaders who gave us their ears, at least. And then I painted Agit's portrait in the center of Paris, where a group of artists secured this wall for me to paint on. And there were more than 50 artists from all over the world, total strangers, who came because they found out, or they heard that there was a mural about a person who died in Super Typhoon. And we finished the wall together. And I painted this phrase on Agit's neck. Says, justice to the voiceless. Okay, there will be more voiceless entities. And when I say entities, it's not just about humans, it's also about plants. They don't speak our language. Animals don't speak our language. Even the stones or the sand don't speak our language. No one will hear them. But if there are people who are willing to stand up and speak for them, then they will have the voice. I continued on painting a lot of other murals around Europe, around Asia, and even the US to send the message across. But of course, art is there to communicate, to send the message. But me and my group, we don't stop there. We don't stop at just communicating and just conversing. We want to show that we can also do actual climate action. And what we do is we conduct climate camps in the south of Manila. We have a secure, intact ecosystem in one of the provinces because activists from the 80s and 90s reforested the mangrove areas and secured the community by coming up with local ordinances that could be followed to avoid encroachment of illegal fishers. And we bring people to the ecosystems to show them the beauty, because you cannot just love, or you can't expect someone to take action if they don't know what they're fighting for. And we continue to plant trees even during the pandemic, able to plant thousands and thousands of trees. And in the urban setting, we help in mobility issues. We have a biking community, a thriving biking community, and we fight for the rights to occupy lanes in the most dangerous roads of the Philippines. I was given the chance to speak at the UN, where my brother used to speak. But I like speaking more outside of the UN, facing the real people. And at some point, I stand with my brother to speak in those big rallies. And there was one unforgettable rally when I met or I saw a young girl. Nobody knew her that time. It was many years ago. But I listened to her speech. She was so meek. She was so humble. But what she spoke about was very important. And I just stood in awe. That's me over there. But listening to this girl, only to find out months later that the world would start listening to her as well. And one of our biggest champions, Pope Francis, he actually gave us a blessing. That's why we were in Rome that time to start the walk. After he shook my hand and my brother's hand, we started walking all the way to Paris. Now, okay, let me show you some important technical stuff. It's not as boring as you would expect. So, this is the map of the Philippines. This is the outline. Okay, seeing 3 super typhoons in one frame. It's unheard of. And for us who know what it feels like to be under that system, it's really scary. You don't talk about one typhoon or one storm now. You talk about 2 or 3 consecutive typhoons. And it's crazy. It's really crazy. It hasn't done, that's not normal. When I was a kid, when we were kids, we would hear of category 3 storms. That's it, category 3s. Now we have 4s and super typhoon Haiyan is 5. Yes,
okay. Yeah, I don't really know the difference between a typhoon and a hurricane. What is the difference?
Yeah, the difference is just the term. The term.
Oh, just
yeah, they use hurricanes in this part of the world. I think they use cyclones in the Pacific. But in the part of Asia, they use typhoon as the term.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Might it have to do with the location of the storm in relation to water or land? Like a hurricane happens more predominantly on the land body, there's a typhoon that happens more so on a body of water.
I think it's more of the region, I believe, because hurricanes also they're born on top of the water, and they gather so much heat that they become powerful. But even if they make a landfall, it will still continue devastating, regions. And if you look at it is important. Look at the date. That's 2015. That's even after Haiyan. Okay? So it didn't stop after Haiyan. Keeps on happening and happening. And Haiyan had a big impact media-wise because it still is the strongest recorded typhoon essentially in human history. But now, even if typhoons keep on coming, media attention is not there anymore because people got used to things like this. Okay. 2016, 2 giant storms. Okay. 2017, worst storm. Monster typhoon, 2018. 2019. Even NASA will feed us information. 2020. It's not ending. It's 2021. 2 giant storms. 2022. Computer storm. 2023. Another couple of storm. Keeps on happening. Yes, sir.
Can I ask? I mean, you're saying the entire environment of the Philippines is changing, has changed.
Yeah, the thing is
How are people adapting to this change? Is there any kind of systematic attempt to adjust? I mean, it's overwhelming to adjust to this change.
Yeah, for the benefit of those who are in the Zoom, essentially the question is about how can Filipinos adapt? Okay? Has there been a systematic change? Well, a lot of changes have happened, but I wouldn't say that it's enough.
Right.
I mean, we still get overwhelmed, although the number of deaths is now reduced drastically because people now listen to advisories. Like in Tacloban City, when Typhoon Haiyan happened, people would still defy authorities when they say you need to evacuate. Okay, a lot of people would leave. A lot of households would leave 1 or 2 males in the family to guard the house in case looters would come. And when the storm surge hit Tacloban City, many men who were left at home were killed. Because of course, those are giant waves, like really strong waves that destroyed the communities. Yeah, as far as the reaction of the community, it's there already. So the casualties are now really drastically lowered. But then as far as systematic change, I would think the change would refer to government effort, government action. Okay, disaster response is there, but then considering land use maps and updated maps as to where hazards are or flood-prone areas are, they're still using the old ones, and that won't work. That would be detrimental to adaptation. That would be even dangerous, to refer to old maps. There are scientists, like progressive scientists, who have been lobbying to use the new maps, but for some reason, the old guys they don't like to use the new maps. So they're still dependent on the old maps that won't tell you if these areas are flood prone or landslide prone. So we still get a lot of casualties due to landslides and flood related deaths. Yeah, whereas if we use the new maps, we can, probably have zero casualties in such occurrences. Yeah. Still a struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so those are examples of the yearly events that we go through. And then, like I said, average is 20 to 21. Okay. It's crazy. And imagine how much we would spend in evacuation and then rebuilding. And how about the crops? I mean, crops won't survive these types of storms. So fishermen can't go out. And coral reefs are destroyed because of the intensity of the waves. And also imagine a farmer would plant, would borrow money to buy seeds, would plant, and before harvest, a typhoon would come. So he would be buried in debt. Now going back to the humans of Tacloban, well, Uncle James survived and Aunt Bella survived Super Typhoon Haiyan. My cousin was able to rescue them safely first to another province, then to Manila, where they stayed in our house. Sadly, the following summer, there was a heat wave and he didn't survive. Mm-hmm. He was back in Tacloban and he just fell down. That's it. Mm-hmm. No one has been doing surveys about heat waves in the Philippines. But hello, I mean, we've been getting record-breaking temperatures. And I'm pretty sure that people are actually, deaths of like strokes, heat strokes and heart attacks could be related to those heat waves. Okay. Before I end, I'd like to show you this again and think about it a second time. What does this mean to you? Normally, coral reefs don't have a role in people's lives. Many people go through their lifetime, not even seeing a reef, right? So for someone to appreciate the importance of this thing that many people don't even see, this could be a rallying point. Because if you can appreciate this, then you can appreciate the more subtle things that you see or experience in your daily lives. And put more importance than things that are close by and are easily reachable. This may mean differently to us in the tropical areas, but believe it or not, 70% of the world population is dependent. And I use the term dependent because it's necessarily that they get protein from the sea. And all life comes from the reefs. So to think that this is not connected to each one of us is not true. Okay. There will be some of us who are vegans, but we know people who eat protein from the sea. Okay. We know families and friends who depend on protein. So coral reefs are not detached from who we are and why we need to save them. So final question would be, so what is it to you? Okay. Maybe that's a question that we can reflect on, especially those in the Zoom, in our Zoom. What is it to you? And what are you willing to do to stop it? So thank you. If you need to know more and you have questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Special thanks to you and to Eddie for helping me out technically.
I just want to say thank you so much. That was so moving to recover from it. But I hope that there'll be an opportunity for the people who weren't in this room will be able to, all of the presentations will be on the website, PEC website, so we can go back in and see the ones that you missed subsequently to the conference. So I think that was a stunning presentation, and we'll not soon forget. Anyone else have anything they'd like to add? Maybe in answer to the question, what are you willing to do?
Yeah, it can be big, can be small, but it doesn't matter. Anything that would move us forward. Like there's a concept of the big pie that we need to solve. Yeah. I mean, you know, the percentages of, let's say, agriculture, maybe about 17%. There's transportation, and then there's what else? A lot of other stuff like energy. Those make up the big pieces of the pie. But each one of us can make a dent, like a small wedge, right? So imagine 7 billion people doing a small thing, right? That's a lot of stuff that you can take off the pie. Yes.
This isn't answering the question quite, but maybe it's pointing towards it. I just want to thank you, and I think the two really powerful things that I'm sort of walking away. I mean, part of the gift that you've given us today, I think, is so often, climate change is so hard for us to make personal, and to really understand the human stories, that are and I think you've done that for us so powerfully, and I will carry your stories with me. And I think that in thinking about how to pursue this work, I want to think about connecting to those stories and helping to amplify those stories. And I also, think it's really powerful that in a, with a crisis that can so often feel profoundly depressing, you've found a way to create beauty, in response, with your art and the way that you've involved others in your art and in your work. And that too just feels like such an important lesson that I want to carry with me, and something that I want to pursue in my role here and in my life. So thanks.
Thanks. Thank you too. I used to be called prophet of doom. Because as early as 12 years ago, I give talks about scientific projections as to what will happen to certain regions of the world if we hit 1.5 or 2 degrees. Obviously, people will think, wow, that's bad. It's going to be really bad. But you don't want to think about bad things, so never mind. Yeah, but these past 2 years, people have been calling me, like literally calling me to tell me, EG, the things you were talking about 12 years ago, 10 years ago, they're all over the news now. And I say, it's not, I didn't guess those things. I didn't invent those things. Scientists base those things through numbers and projections. And that's why they're becoming real now. So you need to take more action. But yeah, it's good to see the beauty of the action and the positivity around it, rather than scaring people off. Because what we need is consistent and constant action, whether it's small action or big action. Let's all go for it. And inspiring people would make people, more what's the term? Excited or encouraged to do so.
Maybe energized and motivated.
Yeah. Right.
And clearly God has a call on your life, and you have responded 110% with all of you. And that's inspiring, just to bear witness to that. So thank you for that witness. And I was thinking, gee, I wonder with my old knees, how far can I walk?
Maybe a couple of thousand. Yeah. The one thing I didn't put in my slides, but yeah, in a couple of minutes, let me share with you what happened to my brother's fasting. So he didn't eat until the end of the hop because there was no meaningful outcome. But there were thousands of people around the world who fasted with him when they heard about that. And people were fasting every single day until the Paris Agreement was signed. That was how many years? 2 whole years. The people were, someone somewhere in the world was fasting every single day. Yes, and when the Paris Agreement was signed, we broke our fast in Paris. People responded, and many faith communities around the world joined us.
That certainly gives me some new ideas in terms of what to organize next.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Put a break before the final presentation, which is I think it's in the chancel in the church.
Okay.
Dr. Ryan.
Thank you.
Thank you again.